Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Wow, have you ever had one of those days where you just wish you could just hit the rewind button and erase it so it was never in existence? I had one of those days today, so I only felt it justified to come in front of the mic today and share a terrifying encounter with you. Now, every so often, I get a few encounters that really strike a chord. I mean, everyone does. Every encounter strikes a chord. But there's those ones that are just, well, they're right up there. And tonight, I'm going to share one of those with you. But, a couple links first. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now, I've taken enough of your time, guys. Let's get on with today's terrifying encounter. Shall we? This is a subscriber's encounter. In the first week of May this year, 2020, I had an encounter that I am still having problems coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in this story, I am not comfortable with giving my name or the details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years I have not had the time to really get out into nature and get my much-needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business. And due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are now very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at the local hospital and is considered an essential worker, so the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands and was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days to go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work, so I took my best friend, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He will lay on his blanket next to the fire all day and night unless I make him head out with me. But as I have learned while camping with Pete, if coyote, bear, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he is a 120-pound muscle and no fat, which always blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time I decided that I wanted to have as many comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV and filled it with all the things I would really want to be comfy. I brought my full-sized backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and a fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd. But on the far end, next to the best fishing area, they have a half a dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from a large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It's a beautiful area, and I love falling asleep to the sound of the water. I set up my camp so that my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy made a sort of U shape and blocked most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened up the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shutdown in March. I arrived at the campground about midday on Friday, and the place was packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye steaks, burgers, and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central PA in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete and turned my trailer into my mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, and drive the 20 minutes into the nearest town once every few days and get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and children just to sell everything and move into the woods and live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see. So I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete, instead of fighting 10 people for the same one fish all day. It felt great to get out to where I belong, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking. But to be honest, when you camp in PA, you should expect to get rained on regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown there were only a few active campsites left. I had gotten to know the two guys in the campsite directly next to mine, and we hung out for a few hours a night while I drank hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me as a next-door neighbor with my full-sized grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, and explored the mountains on foot with my dog. We also liked to just walk the campground itself and stop and talk with scattered campers who were there during the weekdays. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made his way into the more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned, because I had a full-sized grill sitting out in the open at my camp that had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central Pennsylvania has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this, so at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun, loaded with double-aught buck, in the tent with Pete, and just in case a rogue bear posed danger to us, I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Redhawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP, and I already had it on my hip when I left home. It was not ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, and baked some potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil in my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us out a little early, so we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night, a night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At about 10 p.m., I loaded 4 shells of buckshot into my shotgun, got my tent all squared away, and laid down in the tent with my dog next to me on his bed and blanket. I put some citizen journalist news on my phone and put one headphone in my right ear, and kept my left ear clear to listen to my surroundings and to enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line, with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects at night was super loud, and is a kind of song that puts me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember is waking up and my eyes popping open to some kind of hollow, metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still, with my heart slamming from a quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid of my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar power motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on, and someone or something was moving around my camp casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he was still lying down, but his head was up, and his eyes were as big as ping-pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing, but I found it strange that he was silent. It was then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing, and that was when I thought to myself, bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. And next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will almost always make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. To my horror, it started walking toward my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a giant monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you, so you better sound off who you are." Right then it leaned forward right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying deep growl I have ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered and put his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had a giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at the creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw the eyes light up like a golden LED light. It turned its face toward the flashlight, and I could hear the man gasp and say, "Holy shit." Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided that if I don't do something, this thing is going to kill us. So I lied back onto my sleeping pad, took aim at the shadow of the monster's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a big lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, it ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped my tent and poked my head outside to see. It got up on its feet, then ran right into the picnic table and did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could, with my whole body shaking violently. And right as it started to get up again, I shot it a second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up, and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt from behind me and turned to see my neighbor unloading a large revolver into this werewolf-looking thing at maybe 20 yards. The creature was on the side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it was gasping. As it was doing its death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me, so I tried to pump the gun again and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts. Before the last shell chambered, I just pointed and shot without aiming and could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and sprayed blood and flesh all over the place. I was really close to it at this point. The monster stopped flipping out, and its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated and flopping back and forth for at least another couple seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it and tried to stand up. I realized once I stood up that I had been holding my breath the whole time. And when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started pulling me hard backwards away from the monster. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of fear. When I started looking around, there were at least another 5 people showing up there with the same wild-eyed expression. I saw that at least 3 had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and my face. It all happened quickly, but as if often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was in slow motion to me. My dog was still barking and going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed, and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached the thing as it lay there, still occasionally twitching. We all stood over it saying, "What the fuck?" over and over. Eventually, we all started saying it's a werewolf in disbelief. All at once, people all started taking pictures with their phones. Mine was still in the tent. The wolf man was dead. The top half of its head was basically gone, including both of its eyes and the top of its snout. I assumed that was from the first shot I made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what the other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe with blood. But we were all pretty sure it had taken buckshot or .357 mags to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from the puddle that surrounded the beast. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes we summoned the courage to grab some big sticks and flip it over onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I had ever seen. It had dog-like legs and weird-shaped paws, with a kind of small heel for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper legs. It had arms pretty much like a human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. Then the second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that some big-eyed look go over everyone's face. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with full 5 rounds this time, and grabbed my .45 as well and clipped it to my side, inside of my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf and were looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police, game wardens, and paramedics showed up all at once. I could see from the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up the hill off in the distance. The cops were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The 2 game wardens looked worried and not surprised. They told everyone to not take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. The paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital and get checked out, but I refused. The only injury that I had was my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from all the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looked worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from the neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off their phones, which was not much of a problem as only a few people's phones got signal at the campground. When I asked the game warden what the hell that thing was, they told me they didn't know, but that it looks like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys showed up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and t-shirts. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began the questioning. They told me they were with the Federal Fish and Game. They were very interested in the howling we heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was, how close it sounded, and what it sounded like, etc. They also repeated to me 100 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened, and that they would get to the bottom of things and find out what I encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assumed they told my neighbor and anyone else who was on the scene the same thing. They made us open our phones and go through our photos and delete the pics we took one at a time. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of the creature, that it would spell trouble for anyone who had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not try to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked me not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only about 2 hours before the Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten everyone in the campground, and I assumed the other people were told that it was a black bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it was not safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all the blood was hosed off of my trailer, vehicle, and tables, and everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped down my trailer and vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes in my trailer, and they took my tent, bloody clothes, and bloody slippers as evidence, along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave me back my shotgun, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill up my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all this, I have learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listened to Dogman and Wolfman encounter stories day and night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I would reach out to you. I am amazed that the authorities were able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I've been searching for anyone who came forward with anything about the campground closing in the news. Nothing. I'm not interested in putting myself out there any more than just this for now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I am of the Dogman. But all in all, they seem genuinely concerned for my well-being. Yeah, right there. That's all I gotta say. Story ends, silence, then yeah. Wow. I'm reaching out to this gentleman. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is one of the craziest stories I have ever heard. Not crazy like it didn't happen, but holy shit. This poor guy. I mean, and poor Pete. I've got a list of questions I want to ask this gentleman. And wow. I don't know what else to say. I'm at a loss of words, as I'm assuming you guys are as well. I'm going to reach out to this gentleman. Hopefully he and I can speak. And then I can give you some updates on what we talked about. Of course, I'm going to invite him on the show. But like he said, he does not want to put himself out there. I cannot blame him. But holy shit, one of the just incredible encounter. And to you, sir, thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for sharing your encounter with us all. And I honestly hope that you can find peace in yourself. I know it's going to take a very long time. I know you're probably suffering from PTSD, having nightmares, but I really hope in time that you will heal. Anyway, guys, wow. All I gotta say is may the Great Spirit watch over every single one of you and guide you through your path to the future. With that, I'm going to bid you farewell.